Hello everybody, this is John Mark Johnson Jr. again, host of Reformed GGA, and this is going to be our next video in the series on double action, single action autoloaders. In particular today we're going to be talking about topping off an autoloader, which is the idea behind that is filling the gun with as many bullets as it can possibly carry. Now before we do that though, we're going to go ahead and make sure that we're working in a safe environment, which means that the gun that we're working with needs to be checked and cleared. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up the gun. I'm going to make sure that the barrel is pointed in a safe direction, that my trigger finger is off of the trigger, that I know my backstop and what is behind it, all those good kinds of things to make sure that this is as safe as possible. So trigger finger off the trigger, my muzzle is pointed in a safe direction, I know what's around this building, those kinds of things, I know what part of the building I'm in. It's all good to go that way. Now we're going to go ahead and check and make sure that the gun is clear. Whenever you clear a gun, the first thing that you need to do is clear the magazine well, and then the second thing is clear the chamber. So as far as the magazine well is concerned, you can see that there is nothing in the magazine well. I can feel that there's nothing in the magazine well, so we're good there. Next thing that we need to do is check the chamber. To do that, we need to open up the gun. Okay. Gun is open. I can see that there's nothing in the chamber. I'm going to give it a bit of a shake because I'm going to do a physical check as well, and I want to make sure that the slide doesn't come slamming home on my finger. So I'm going to test first to make sure it's good, and then I'm going to feel inside the chamber, and sure enough, there's nothing in the chamber. And so this gun is checked and cleared. It's perfectly safe to work with. Alright, getting back to the subject at hand, we're talking about filling this gun with as many bullets as it can possibly hold. So what we want to have when we're done is a completely full magazine and one in the chamber. That's as many as this gun can hold in a standard flush-fitting configuration. So the question is, how are we going to do that? The idea is actually pretty simple. What we do is we take a full magazine. Now, just for a point of clarification, this is not live ammunition. These are just dummy rounds. Okay, they're completely inert. There is no powder charge, no real bullets, etc., etc. It's basically just an aluminum shell that happens to be the same shape as a regular bullet, but it's completely inert. Okay, so we're going to take a loaded, air quotes, magazine. It's not really loaded. This is not real ammunition, but you take a full loaded magazine, stick it into the gun, and now you have your magazine filled, which is great, but you still don't have the chamber filled. So to fill the chamber, we're just going to load it like we normally would. You pull back, you let it go, it flies forward as fast as it can go, it loads around into the chamber, you're good. And letting it fly forward like that is just fine if you're loading rounds or even dummy rounds into the gun. The only time when you don't want to let it fly forward is when you don't have anything for the slide to press against, no live round. If it's empty and you're just letting it slide forward, that can damage the gun. But here we're actually loading something into it, so it's just fine. Now for safety reasons, I'm going to go ahead and decock the gun. So I just push this lever up, it dropped the hammer, and I'm going to leave it up because that is the safety. Now the question that we have here is, this is loaded as the gun can be, and the answer to that is no. We have the chamber loaded now, that's great, but our magazine is now short one round because we just loaded it into the chamber. So we're down one round as far as how much we can put into this gun. The magazine is now short. We have the chamber filled, but the magazine is short. So what we're going to do is we're going to take out the magazine, load it up again, we're going to put one more round into it, put it back in the gun, and then the gun will be completely loaded. So to do that, go ahead and drop the magazine, making sure your trigger finger is off the trigger, of course making sure that the gun is pointed in the safe direction, all those good things. Set this magazine aside for now, and then you're going to find a safe place to put the gun. Okay, a place where you can set it that is going to be stable. It's not going to roll off of it or fall off of it or tip off of it or anything like that. A nice, solid, flat surface that it can't slide off of or roll off of or anything like that. And also needs to be a place such that when you go to pick the gun up from it, you can maintain control of your trigger finger such that it's not going to actually be on the trigger or even on the trigger guard. Okay, so here on my desk, a great place that I found is the mouse pad. The desk itself is flat, and the mouse pad is such that it has decent traction, so it's not going to allow the gun to slip around. So even if my desk happens to have a little bit of a slant to it, which it could slide off of if it was smooth, I'm going to put it there to provide a little extra traction. So that is where my gun is going for now. Now I can go back to the magazine. Like I said, we took one round out of the magazine when we loaded the round into the chamber. So this magazine is now one round short. So I'm going to grab a spare bullet. This is not really a bullet. This is just a snap cap. It's dummy ammunition. It's not real. There's, like I said, there's no primer, no powder charge, nothing in it. Completely inert. But these are our bullets. We're just doing this to stay safe. So we'll go ahead and load it up into our magazine. We have now replaced the one bullet that we have in the chamber of the gun, and we're going to stick this now full magazine into the gun so that it's as loaded as possible. So again, we'll go ahead and pick up the gun. Make sure that you keep your trigger finger off the trigger. Make sure it's pointed in a safe direction at all times. And then stick that newly loaded magazine into the gun. So now we have one round in the chamber. We have a completely full magazine. The gun is as loaded as can be. On this particular gun, it is made to hold 13 rounds in the magazine, and of course, it can always hold one round in the chamber. So now we have 14 rounds total, whereas normally, if we didn't take the time to undo the magazine, put one more round in, and stick it into the gun, we'd only normally hold 13 rounds. So we increased our capacity by 1. That is the idea behind topping off. Now, I'm going to go ahead and clear this all out. Go ahead, make sure that's clear again. Nothing in the mag well, feel nothing in the mag well. You can see nothing in the chamber, feel nothing in the chamber, which is exactly what I want. Go ahead and close up the gun, set it to the side here. Alright, so that's the idea behind topping off a gun. But there is a little bit of controversy surrounding that idea. The idea itself is fairly simple. You just load an extra round into the gun. You load it once, chamber a round, unload the magazine, stick another round in there, and now you have as much as the gun can hold with that particular magazine. It works. But there are some questions that come up. One is, first of all, how necessary is that? And then the second one, which is actually fairly important, is whether or not that is the proper technique. And as to the first part, how necessary is it to load the gun up as completely as possible? Frankly, that depends on you and your situation. For a lot of people, the extra round that you would gain in capacity is usually not a big difference in and of itself. I mean, considering this gun here, it normally holds 13 rounds. And if I top off, if I put one into the chamber and then I put one more into the magazine to replace the one that's in the chamber, I get up to 14. And that's, less than a 10% increase in capacity. That's not huge. For a lot of guns out there, especially ones that are called compact and going up from there, the extra round usually does not make that much of a difference. Your odds of running into a situation that you could not fix with 13 rounds, but you could fix with 14 rounds, is fairly minimal in most cases. However, as the size of the magazine gets smaller and smaller, and usually the size of the gun as well, then being able to top off becomes more significant. So for example, if you have a gun that only holds 6 rounds, for example, the Springfield XDE standard magazine is only 6 rounds in capacity. Now they do make extended magazines for it that will hold some more, but the standard capacity magazine only holds 6 rounds. That's not a ton. It's not terrible, but it's also not a ton. And when I'm talking about the XDE, I don't know if I mentioned, but it's the XDE 45. And typically larger caliber guns like the 45 tend to hold fewer rounds than smaller caliber guns. It's just the way it goes. But relatively few rounds normally with the gun. It's only 6. And so if I top off, putting one round in the chamber, then an extra round into the magazine to replace the one in the chamber, then I have increased my magazine capacity by about 17%. And that is not negligible. Your odds of running into a situation where you might need to use all 7 rounds compared to 6 is still relatively minute. Most self-defense shootings that are citizen-oriented, we're not talking about military cases or law enforcement cases, things like that, just normal citizen cases, not gang-related or anything like that, Most of them are resolved in 5 rounds or less. There's a few different studies out there that say what the average number is. One study says 2 rounds, one study says 4 rounds. I just say 5 rounds or less to kind of just lump them all together. That's pretty safe for most people in most situations. And so that extra round or 2 or 3, as the case may be, in most cases isn't going to make much of a difference, but there are rare circumstances where they will. And where they tend to make the most difference is in situations where you deal with multiple attackers. And those are fairly common if you're attacked at home, and they can also be fairly common if you're attacked in a well-populated public space where you might have a mass shooting or something like that. And then in those kinds of cases, or if you simply have someone who's really angry with you, someone who's been breathing out death threats against your life and those kinds of things, those are situations where it might not be resolved in the standard statistical 2 to 4 rounds. And in those cases, having greater number of rounds can be useful. But again, like I said, as a percentage, the really high capacity guns, adding 1 extra round to them isn't going to make much of a difference. For example, I have a handgun that with a little base plate extender on it has a 21 round magazine, and if I top it off, it's 22 rounds. Well, that's still a less than 5% increase. That's not really statistically significant. At that point, just carrying a spare magazine is going to give me way more rounds than that extra 1 little round would do. But nonetheless, for guns with smaller magazine sizes, it's not a bad idea. It might not be overly necessary, but if you don't have many rounds to begin with, it is a good idea. So taking your Springfield XDE 45 caliber, and just by topping it off, making it into a 7-round holding gun instead of a 6-round holding gun, yeah, that's statistically significant. That can be beneficial. In a lot of cases, that would be worthwhile doing. Now, it might not be necessary at the range, because taking out the magazine, loading it, finding a safe place to set the gun, all those kinds of things, kind of a pain. You usually want to do it at the range, but for regular everyday carry, if you have a gun with a small magazine, it's not a bad idea. Now, the other issue is, what is the proper method of topping off your gun? And I would argue that the method that I showed you, where you stick the magazine in the gun first, rack the slide, remove the magazine, load it, and then reinsert the magazine, is the correct method. There are some people, though, that will prefer a method that, while much more efficient time-wise, is a lot harder on the gun. And I'm not going to demonstrate the whole thing just because it is harder on the gun, but I am going to demonstrate for you guys what they basically do. So, check to make sure that the gun is clear, it's empty, can feel that it's empty as far as the mag well. I can see inside the chamber, there's nothing there. Give it a good shake to make sure the slide doesn't go home. Feel inside, there's nothing there. Okay, the method that some people will prefer to top off their gun will be to have a loaded magazine sitting at the ready, and they'll take the extra bullets and they'll put it into the gun first. They'll just drop it into the chamber, close the slide up, and then after they've closed the slide up, they're going to go ahead and stick the magazine in. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and close the slide on this because that's actually really, really, really hard on the gun. And that's the issue. There are a lot of people that like to do it that way because you just drop a round in, pull back on the slide, and then stick the magazine in and you're good to go, and it's real quick. But it's really, really hard on the gun, and let me show you why. Let me go ahead and take that out first. Get the spare bullet out. And what makes it so hard on the gun is the way that the gun is designed to function. So I'm taking apart the slide right now, eating to the guts. All right, so this is, of course, the slide of the gun. And when it's open, this little strip of metal on the bottom of the slide is what pushes against the bullets. That pushes them up into the chamber of the gun. And you can see that the face of the bolt is very, very, very flat. I'm going to go ahead and turn it upside down here. But the face of the bolt there is completely flat. So what happens is once the bullet is pushed on that little rail, it will actually just slide up into the gun, and it basically sits in there like that. Now, of course, the barrel, the chamber is around it, and then the barrel in front of that. But this is basically how it sits in the gun, and it moves up, and it slides up, and it's meant to slide up. And I don't know how well you guys can or cannot see it, but on the side, I'll go ahead and show you on this side. On the side of the slide, you can see this little metal strip, and what that is what's called the extractor. And most of it is back here, but there's a little part of it that comes around on the side of the bolt, and it hangs onto just the edge of the bullet. So the bullet comes from the bottom and it slides up. I'm holding the slide upside down right now so you guys can see, but it actually slides up and it fits right under that extractor. And that way when the slide opens up, it actually catches on the rim of the cartridge and pulls the bullet out of the chamber. And that's how the gun cycles. The problem is that if you start out with the bullets already in the chamber, it's not going to slide under that extractor like it's supposed to. Instead, it's going to sit right on top of the extractor. And in order to get it to go back and seat fully like it's supposed to, you actually have to push the extractor out of the way. And the extractor is not meant to be pushed from that direction. See if I can show you guys a little bit better with my hands. So let's pretend that this is the bullet and this is the rim. And then this other hand will play the part of the extractor. The way that it's meant to work is the bullet comes up right underneath the extractor, goes into the chamber, then when the gun fires, the extractor pulls the bullet out, and then it gets tipped out the side and comes tumbling out of the gun or flying out of the gun. Okay, that's how it's meant to cycle. The bullet comes up from the magazine, right underneath the extractor, gets pushed in, gets pulled out, tips over. The rim of the bullets, which my thumb is representing here, the rim of the bullet is always supposed to be underneath the extractor. If I do what some people do in terms of just dropping the bullets into the chamber, I'll go ahead and put my gun back together here. I love using my Bersa TPR-9C as my demonstration gun because it is so much easier to put together and take apart compared to a lot of my other guns. Go ahead and cycle that. Alright, but as I was saying, a lot of people, when they top off their gun, they like to just drop the bullet in like that. And it does get... where'd it go? Oh, that's okay. But it does accomplish the goal of getting the bullet into the chamber, that's true, but you now have the bullet in the chamber, and the extractor, which is part of the bottom part of the slide or the back part of the slide, is going to have to come up, and it's actually going to have to push past that lip. And what's going to happen is it's going to actually get pushed off to the side and then come back over it. And the extractor is not meant to have force coming on the front of it. It's meant to have force behind it, the rim, but it's not meant to have force on the top. And if you keep having constant pressure on it like that, you can actually wind up breaking the extractor. Really not good. Okay. And so does dropping the round into the chamber like that and then sticking a full magazine into the gun work? A lot of times it will, but it will damage your extractor. And so that is why the standard practice is what I showed you guys. Magazine first, chamber. Since we're talking about double action guns, go ahead and decock it. Take the magazine out, set the gun in a safe place, safe direction, make sure you're careful of your trigger finger. Go ahead and load up the magazine with an extra round. Okay. Okay, extra round magazine. Go ahead and load that up. Then go ahead and stick that full magazine into the gun that already has a round in the chamber. Now your gun is as loaded as it can be. That's the proper way. The other way of opening the gun up first does technically work, but it is really, really hard on the extractor. And the dead giveaway as to whether or not it's going to be hard on the gun or not, because there are some guns that's actually okay to do it with. Most handguns it's not. But the dead giveaway is the bolt face. Okay, so going back to the bolt again. Okay, we'll face it right side up this time. If it is a smooth transition from the bottom of the bolt to the center where the bullet is held in chamber when it's in battery, if it's a smooth transition there's no lip or anything like that, you can, it's going to be hard on the extractor if you just drop the bullet into the chamber and then rack it that way. These kinds of guns are designed to be magazine fed only. They are designed so that the bullet comes up underneath the extractor. They're never meant for the bullet to be in front of the extractor. Okay, so the dead giveaway is when you're going from the magazine to the position in the bolt where the bullet is going to be held in place for firing. If that's a smooth transition, there's no lip or anything for it to overcome, that is a gun that is designed to be magazine fed. Now there are some guns out there that is not the case, and with them it is perfectly fine to drop the round into the barrel first. Here's a good example of one. Okay, so you see the place where the bullet is meant to be held, and you'll see this little lip that comes before where it's held. It's basically held inside of a little divot on the front of the bolt there. That's where the bullet is meant to go. See if I can get it in there and get it to hold. Alright, so that is how the bullet is meant to be held there. And there's this little lip from the underside of the magazine. So the lip is there, but it actually has to come up and then down and in. And on these kinds, they are designed with their extractors are designed to be pushed against. So if I want to, I can go ahead and just push the extractor out of the way to make the bullet fit in. On these ones, that's perfectly fine to do. In fact, there's no other way to get the bullet into the right spot without forcing it past the extractor in one way or the other. Okay, and like I said, the dead giveaway is that it actually has a divot there. There's no other way to get the bullet in there than directly into it. But if the bolt face where the bullet goes has a smooth transition, okay, and my finger is where the magazine would be. If going from the magazine up to where the bullet sits is a smooth transition, there's no little spot for it that it has to dip into. If it's just a smooth transition up, that is a gun that is designed to be fed from the magazine, and it's the only way that it should ever be fed. Alright, so that is topping off a magazine. How useful it is or is not, like I said, with higher capacity guns it tends to be much less useful. For lower capacity guns it can be more useful, usually not overly significantly so, but not enough to make it something that's not worth at least considering. And then there is in fact a proper way to do it, and with most guns that is going to be magazine fed. Put the magazine in, chamber around, take the magazine out, top off that magazine, put it back in the gun that has a round already loaded into the chamber, then the gun will be as full as possible. If you decide to open up the action, drop a bullet in, and then close the action after that, you risk damaging the extractor. On most handguns, the bullet is meant to come up from the magazine underneath the extractor. It's never meant to be in front of it. It's always meant to be behind it on the vast majority of handguns that are out there. Like I said, there are guns that are designed to have the bullet forced in from backwards, basically. But that's not the case with most handguns. By the way, for those of you who are wondering, this is the bolt from my Stribog, which is not a true handgun, and most people's thinking. Legally speaking, it's classified as a pistol, but it's not really a handgun. But that's where that comes from. Alright, so that is topping off your double action, single action autoloader. What it is, how significant it is, and a major pitfall to avoid, damaging your gun. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Bye.